I've been running D&D games for 7 years now. That may seem like a lot to some of you and absolutely no time at all to others. But during that time, I've accumulated a lot of DM knowledge, and my hope is that this video will be a shortcut for you to level up your DMing. Over the years, I've read books, watched videos, read articles, and looked through lots and lots of forum posts. I then brought all that to my table and developed my own style by figuring out what did and didn't work for me.
I know Kung Fu. Show me.
So get your notebooks ready because there's about to be a lot of information coming your way. The other thing that'll be coming your way later in the video is an announcement from our sponsor, Cheipaku. Welcome to the woods? That's right, I decided to take a page out of Bob Worldbuilder's RPG book, put on my red plaid, and go for a hike. It is bear season though, so I hope I don't regret this. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is a great way to make a conclusion feel satisfying and to give a story more impact. But how do you foreshadow if you have no idea what the players are going to do or what's going to happen later in the campaign? Don't worry about it. Just put a bunch of mysterious items or clues in the beginning of the campaign and then figure out how to tie them into the story later once you have a better idea of the direction. Prophecies are great for this. Prophecies are ominous and vague enough that they can be interpreted many different ways. So just give the party a prophecy early on, listen to how they interpret it and the ideas that they come up with, and then make some version of that come true. It'll blow their minds that you planned such a complex plot way in advance, when in reality you just dropped a bunch of random breadcrumbs early on and then waited to see what they showed interest in. Group size really changes the dynamic of the game, and it changes how you play. If you're finding that your game is boring, it might be that you have too many people. I've played in groups from 2 players and a DM up to 7 players and a DM. Less people is more fun. I think the sweet spot is around 3 or 4 players, but don't be afraid to start a game with just 2 players. It's still fun. With less people, scheduling becomes way easier, combat is faster, and you can go deeper into the player backstories because there are fewer of them. I played a 2-player adventure a couple of weeks ago, and during combat, one of the players said, "It's my turn again? Are you sure?" I don't think I've ever heard someone say that at a D&D table. Follow your players' interests. If they're more interested in a side plot in the campaign and seem to be spending a lot of time on it, shift the focus of the campaign to involve that. There are no side quests in my games. Wherever the players go is the main quest. By the way, I'm on my way to see a huge tree, so if you stick around to the end of the video, you can see a 600-year-old Douglas fir tree. Pretty cool. Don't be afraid to be too obvious with your clues. Your players aren't inside your head, they can't see the full picture. If you drop things in that are too subtle, chances are it'll get missed. If you do drop a clue or a hint and it gets missed, try giving them the same clue a second or third time. Information that's repeated will seem important. The more times it's repeated, the more important it'll seem. Pay attention to what your players engage with. It's the best and most honest feedback you'll get. Players won't be able to help it when they get excited about something, and that's often way more telling than any answer they'll give you if you ask them straight out. Try to break up your intense main plot arcs with some lower tension break sessions. If the stakes are through the roof all the time, that'll become the norm. If you break up the intensity with some lighter sessions, like a low stakes adventure or a shopping episode, then when you return to the high stakes action, it'll feel as intense as it should. But with the lower stakes break episodes, remember to give your players a reason to engage with them. If there's a potential world-ending threat that needs attending to, your players aren't going to want to engage with your carnival games. But if they brought the lost artifacts to the Citadel and they have to wait 4 days for the wizards to create the device, then they might go on a shopping day in the city. If you're feeling burnt out, try reducing how often you play, or try taking a couple weeks off after the next arc. There's no need to force yourself to power through. If it's becoming a chore, then ask your group if anyone else would like to run something while you take some time to prepare the next arc. Your group would way rather play a little bit less often, but play for years, rather than have you burn out. Don't worry about your mistakes. Villains won't come across the way you wanted, story beats won't land like you thought they would, combat encounters will be unbalanced. Sometimes you'll have a bad session that isn't fun, but no one will remember those. Your players will remember that weird funny shopkeeper you made up on the spot. They'll remember how cool they felt when they whomped that boss in one round. They'll remember all the good times around the table. So when you make mistakes, and you will, just learn from them and move on. There are a lot of different ways to play D&D, and not everyone likes to play the same way. Some people want to play dungeon crawls, where sessions are puzzle and combat focused. Some people want to play roleplay heavy games, where they almost never get into combat and it's just conversation after conversation with NPCs. There's no right way to play, but it is important that you like to play the same way as the other people in your group. If you want to run a roleplay heavy intrigue game, but your players just want to bash monsters and collect magic items, you're gonna have a bad time. Tone and consistency don't matter that much in a TTRPG world. Don't feel constrained to just one type of fantasy in your campaign. It's totally fine if there's a high elven forest kingdom in one area and an arcanotech city in another. Just make up whatever is inspiring you at the time, and go with what your players are interested in. If you want to have a murder mystery in a dark gritty city followed by an arc where silly gnomish inventions have come to life, go for it.
Huh? The lawnmower! The lawnmower?
If you need to make a ruling at your table, but you're not sure if allowing the thing will be game-breaking or not, you can always tell the player that you'll allow it this time and then research the rule after the session. This will stop the flow from being killed at the table, and you also don't have to commit to a potentially game-breaking ruling if you find out something is way overpowered. If a player is asking a very specific rules question and it's not clear why, then ask them, what are you trying to do? This can give you the bigger picture to make a decision with all the information. As much as possible, try not to shut down any of your players' ideas. I try to never say no outright. I'll instead try to say yes, but. Whenever I'm trying to decide if I'll allow something, I'll always weigh the benefit against the cost for the player. What are they trying to get? Does it have a mechanical benefit? If so, what are they offering to pay? D&D is a game of resource management, so if you're giving your players a benefit outside of the rules, try to give it a cost that's worthy of that benefit. Maybe that cost is gold, maybe it's a spell slot, maybe it's an action, or maybe it's a social cost. Whatever it is, if the player is getting a benefit, there should be a cost associated with it. For example, if a player wants to try to attune to a magic sword during combat, I might look at the benefit the sword would provide and then tell them that they could use an action to make an ability check to do that. The cost of an action during combat is significant, especially if it's not a guaranteed success. Use a map. I like Theater of the Mind because it's easy, but my players don't. My players have told me that it's really difficult for them to visualize the positions of people on the battlefield, and they really prefer to see everything laid out. Sometimes I like to make my own maps, but sometimes I just want something made for me. Peku, the sponsor of today's video, have a massive catalog of beautiful pre-made maps, and now they have a new offer. Che and Peku have been making maps and scenes for years, and more recently they've started making tokens. They've amassed a huge catalog of over 6,000 maps, 2,000 scenes, and 300 tokens. Previously, they've offered separate subscriptions for each of these with different tiers on their Patreon. But now they're offering all three for the price of 2 on their website with unlimited access to the whole catalog. The interface they've built on the website is really excellent, and it makes it easy to find exactly what you're looking for. The maps and scenes are all tagged and searchable. You can see all the variations for each map in one place. There are so many variations for each map with different seasons, states of decay, and weather that it's easy to find something that perfectly fits your world. Just browsing through the catalog can give you all kinds of inspiration. The token editor is something that's new this year, but it already has over 300 tokens, with 15 new ones being added each week. Each token has presets, or you can use the randomizer to quickly generate a variety. Or perhaps the coolest feature is that you can go in and customize each aspect by hand to create exactly what you need. Check out the bundle at the link below. Until something is said at the table, it doesn't exist in the world. If you prep some twist, but during the game your player has a theory that's way better than what you prepped, go with that. Or if you think of something better on the spot, go with that. Get rid of anything that's not fun. Don't be afraid to retcon, change, or get rid of anything in your game if your group isn't enjoying it. At the end of the day, fun is the most important thing, so get rid of anything that isn't fun. From a ship to a small village to a sprawling city, almost all fantasy locations need the same number of fleshed out NPCs. The idea of running D&D in a city setting can be intimidating because you might think you need to prep way more, but the reality is that your players only have the capacity to remember a few characters, so you only need to prep a few characters. Regardless of the setting, the types of characters are often the same as well. If you prep a figure of authority, their second in command, a knowledge keeper or quest giver, someone mysterious, and 3 or 4 characters that you can drop into any other role. That should cover you. In a small village, the tavern owner could be the de facto leader in the village, and maybe they're friends with the blacksmith, who's the second in command. An old witch who lives in the woods outside the town could have knowledge the party is seeking, and the mysterious person could be someone who's lived in the village all their life, but no one knows their name. In a city, you might prep a monarch, their master of spies, a scribe at the Grand Library, and a pickpocket who's brazen enough to be stealing from the lords and ladies right in the court. There are many more people around, but realistically, your players are going to talk to a similar number of characters per session. So write out your clues, and wherever they end up going, drop in your NPCs and have each of them give out a clue. When describing something, try to use multiple senses. Even just using one other sense beyond just sight can make your descriptions that much more impactful. You don't need to go overboard describing everything with all 5 senses, but using 2 or 3 can really level up your descriptions, especially using scent and touch. My theory is that we're so used to watching TV and movies and playing video games where we get both sight and sound that they aren't as impactful, whereas scent and touch are reserved for lived experiences. So describing the stale, musty air that hasn't been breathed in 1,000 years in an old crypt, or the feeling of rough-hewn stone under your fingertips as you lift the lid of the sarcophagus, will be much more evocative than describing the crunching of bones underfoot, or describing the scenes depicted in the carvings on the side of the sarcophagus. When describing a scene, I try to think about contrast and what has changed recently. A stillness settles in the temple. You weren't aware that there was any noise until it stopped. Now you're surrounded by utter silence. When we perceive things in real life, we're more tuned into changes than constants. This is a survival mechanism that we've evolved with because when something changes, it could mean danger. But you can use that to make your descriptions more realistic. Describing a change in air pressure in a cave, suddenly feeling a light breeze, a new smell, movement out of the corner of your eye, light dimming or brightening, or chaos to silence. You need to bring the energy to the table, even if you have to fake it. If you're not excited to play and excited about this game you're bringing, the players won't be either. It can be really hard sometimes to muster that energy, but I promise you that if you get excited and enthusiastic, you and your players will have a better time. You just need to be the tinder at the beginning of the session to get the fire going. Once the players start to get excited and enthusiastic, you can feed back off of that, and then you'll all be having a great time. So if you've had a hard day, you're tired, you kind of wish that someone canceled, go into the bathroom, slap yourself in the face a couple of times, try as hard as you can to put on a big smile, and go have a great time. Because Billy Joel didn't start the fire, you did. How do you come up with ideas? Where do you get inspiration from? Read books, watch TV, watch movies, watch YouTube videos, look at art, listen to music. I keep a notebook where I write down all the little ideas or tips that resonate with me when I come across them. If I'm looking for inspiration, I can just flip through it and get inspired. I've also found that taking some sort of non-fantasy book, movie, or TV show and trying to convert it into a D&D setting or adventure has provided me with so much inspiration. And that's exactly what we do on our podcast called We Like D&D. We build D&D characters based on pop culture characters, then we try and build a setting or adventure out of their world. For example, we came up with an island chain campaign idea based on Pokemon. In this society where your quality of life is determined by your strength as a fighter, the players are trying to get to Paradise, the last island in the chain. To do that, they need to fight each of the gatekeepers, getting stronger as they go and learning the elemental fighting style of each island. If that sounds interesting, it's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Check it out at the links below. But you can do this with whatever media you're into at the moment. What would Severance look like as a D&D adventure or campaign? What elements could you take from Andor? What about The Studio? It becomes a fun game that you can play while you're doing dishes or anything else. How would I turn X into a D&D campaign? But then write it down, otherwise you'll forget, and when you need it most, the ideas won't come to you. I brought my best bear detectors with me just in case, so we should be fine. As Mike Shea, aka Sly Flourish, says, players just want to see their characters do cool things. So make your players feel cool. Describe actions in combat as acrobatic and just totally badass. When they come up with an idea, get excited. And when they have a big win, have the people in the world celebrate it. If they defeat a feared tyrant or monster near a town, have the townsfolk throw a celebration. Revel in their victory. Social rewards are just as important as treasure. If you get into a situation where your players womp you, don't fight it. Don't try to make up rules on the spot or give your big bad special powers all of a sudden. Just let the players have the win. It's really fun to get one over on the DM, so if it happens, play it up like you're jokingly a bit upset, like those meddling players ruined all your evil plans. I set up an encounter where one of the BBEG's lieutenants was going to reveal himself to the party and then make a grand escape. I set him up with all the spells and magic items he would need and a bunch of minions to keep the players busy. But one player rolled exceptionally well and managed to use his action surge along with a combo of magic items to completely catch and knock out my BBEG in one turn before he even got a spell off. I could have squirmed and said he had some magic power that let him pull off a daring escape, but instead I let the player have the win and played it up a bit about how they completely wrecked me. Guess what? That player still brings it up as one of his favorite moments in the campaign. Being a DM is a magic trick. This is a bit controversial because it can make it seem more intimidating to try DMing if you've always been a player, but I stand by it. As a player, I think it's more fun when I believe my DM has a complex web of strings behind the DM screen and is masterfully manipulating the world that we're playing in. Watching a good magic trick induces wonder. Even as an adult, you know magic isn't real, right? But also, how'd they pull that off? A good magic trick can make you wonder, even if it's just for a second, if magic is real. You can produce that same sense of wonder at the table by being a little bit more performative. Your players don't need to know you just made that character up on the spot. They were going to be there the whole time. They don't need to know that you fudged the hit points a little so the battle would be a little bit more suspenseful. They don't need to know that you didn't come up with an answer to your puzzle, that you were just going to pick the best answer that the players came up with to be the right answer. By putting on a bit of an act, you can make it seem like you have it all figured out back there, and they're unraveling these complex plots that were planned way in advance, when really you just threw out a bunch of mysterious things in the first few sessions and now you're creatively tying them back to the plot. Have a bit of showmanship in your role as the DM, your players will appreciate it. Although you're always cheering for the player characters and hoping they succeed in the end, don't be afraid to have a lightly adversarial relationship with your players. I stress lightly adversarial because you really have to be careful with this. After all, you make the rules, so if you actually wanted to win, it wouldn't be very fair, and then you'd stop playing and you'd all lose. But what I mean is, don't be afraid to razz the player characters in character as the BBEG, and don't be afraid to play it up if your players start jokingly going at you out of character. I like to rile my players up sometimes because that little bit of joking anger gets them more invested in the combat. Again, be careful with this, because if the combat turns and it's looking like they might not win, don't be jokingly celebrating when you crit on them. It's best to do this early in a combat when it could go either way.
Just listen to it, you sick.
Somebody stop it! Stop it! Where's the Stop it!
How much gold should you give your PCs? This does depend on how much access you want them to have to resources. Gold not only gives them access to better equipment and makes them mechanically stronger, but also gives them access to more social status. They can pay bribes, make donations, and get access to places that only the rich and powerful have access to. Martin DM on Reddit made a handy table that they created by going through the treasure tables to determine the average party wealth by level. You can use this as a general guideline for how much gold to give out. If you're using this in combination with the price list PDF from my 7 free tools video, things should work out pretty well. But you can always tune the availability of certain items if the party is getting too powerful. This took me a long time to realize, but creating characters and threats that align with the guidelines for the tiers of play will make your life so much easier. What do I mean by that? At certain levels, the PCs will have a certain power level, and they should have the renown and face threats that go with it. If they don't, things will start to not really make sense in your story. That's totally fine if that's what you want to do in your campaign, but if you're wondering why things aren't matching up, this could be why. For example, if the party is 5th level, but the players describe their characters as a bunch of farmhands who are picking up swords for the first time, it's not going to make a lot of sense when they can easily defeat any contingent of town guards in combat. Conversely, if you start at level 1 and your players describe their characters as heroic adventurers who have already accomplished so much, but then in play they struggle against a few goblins, that doesn't make sense either. The tiers can be found on page 43 of the 2024 PHB, and they go like this. Tier 1 is levels 1 to 4. Characters are apprentice adventurers, although they're already more powerful than the general population. The threats they face usually affect local farmsteads or small villages. Tier 2 is levels 5 to 10. The characters are full-fledged adventurers and they likely have some renown. The threats they face affect cities and kingdoms. Tier 3 is levels 11 to 16. The characters are now special, even among adventurers. Threats usually involve entire regions. Tier 4 is levels 17 to 20. Characters become heroes of legend. They face threats that affect the world and the multiverse. They can get an audience with almost anyone. Telling your players the type of social status they might have for the level you're starting at can help them create backstories that feel appropriate for the power level. If they create a backstory that seems underpowered or overpowered for their level, instead of shutting it down, ask them to come up with a story reason to explain this, which can lead to some creative characters. How many magic items should you give out? There's a great table in the 2024 DMG on page 218 that outlines magic items awarded by level. This is just a starting point, and you can do whatever you want in your world. Thinking of alternate win conditions ahead of time will make your combats more interesting. Whether the monsters will flee after being reduced by a certain number of HP, or they're willing to negotiate if certain conditions are met, or reinforcements will arrive after a certain amount of time, on either side. Thinking about why these creatures are fighting in the first place will help you think of a realistic reason that they might stop fighting. The blog and book, The Monsters Know What They're Doing, has lots of suggestions for alternate win conditions. Do you want to make your players more invested in defeating the villain? Make the villain do things your players hate in real life. Get to know your friends, find out what pisses them off, and then exploit it in your D&D games.
I am around you, I'm in here.
Do your players hate big corporations? Maybe there's a merchant guild with plans to monopolize the grain farmers and start tripling the price of grain. Are environmental issues important to them? Maybe fire giants are pillaging the ancient forest to harvest resources. Do they hate seeing vulnerable people get taken advantage of? Maybe there's an evil mage luring peasants in with food and performing terrible experiments on them. Now your players will be invested, and it'll be cathartic whenever they defeat this evil. The premise of your adventure or campaign doesn't have to be completely unique. Putting a little twist on a classic story can be enough to intrigue your players. Then, once it hits the table, your players will make it unique. The decisions they make and the things they come up with will make the story one of a kind. So don't worry if Stop the Lich King from Rising Again has been done 1,000 times. It hasn't been done exactly the way your players are going to do it. Before your players make characters, don't be afraid to tell them exactly what they're going to be doing in the campaign. That way, they'll be able to make characters with motivations that would make them want to engage in the campaign. They may decide to do something else once they start playing, but giving them a clear objective right from the get-go can help everyone get on the same page. We made it! We made it to the big tree. This thing is over 600 years old and it's over 8 feet wide. It's not the oldest tree in this forest by far, but it's the oldest easily accessible tree. But anyways, that was a lot of tips. If you'd like to see some of the best D&D advice I've found in my comments section from people like you, check out this video here. I appreciate you.